What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. So, in this video, I want to talk about something that came up a moment ago, a little while ago, and in a particular YouTuber's live stream. The topic of protection as it relates to black women, as well as black men, came up. And this YouTuber presented an argument that was presented to her by a black man who she used to be cool with. I'm not quite sure who this black man is that she's referring to, but I think I may have an idea about who he is. I'm not sure, but I think so. You know, I think at one point or another he was low-key big up in himself as having an infinite amount of wisdom. Y'all know who I'm talking about. But I don't know for sure who this person is that she's referring to who told her about this. So ultimately this is speculation on my part. But nevertheless, this topic came up, right? And she presented an idea that was presented to her by a black man, which was black men don't protect black women because they don't feel that they own black women or have a sense of ownership on black women. I believe it was something to that effect. I don't know exactly point blank from blank how it was presented, but something to the effect of black men don't feel a sense of ownership when it comes to black women. Thus, not feeling a sense of ownership, not feeling like they're obligated to protect black women. And of course, we're speaking about black men and black women as collectives. Not so much on an individual basis, although, this perhaps could be applied to individual basis as well, but more so about collectives, groups, right? So this black female YouTuber, she presented this argument during her live stream, and her audience is mainly black women, with other groups of people sprinkled throughout, people from other groups kind of sprinkled throughout, and the black women who were in the live stream sort of kind of somewhat took issue with the argument, and as well kind of even countered the argument. And it was not in a combative way for the most part, but it was just trying to have conversations, discussions, and dialogue, and maybe even debates about protection when it comes to black women, right? So that was the argument that was presented, and for me, I'm like, I think that is a piece of the argument. I do think that is a factor, but I don't think that is the deciding factor or the ultimate factor. I'll say it can be a deciding factor in some cases, but I don't think that's ultimately what it boils down to. I think it's more to it than that, though. And again, whole ownership or a feeling of ownership for black men when it comes to black women in order to protect them. And I'm thinking, well, don't some of these same black men feel a sense of ownership when they tell black women how to feel, how to act, how to style their hair, not to wear weave and or makeup, who to date, etc.? Considering if you're dictating or trying to dictate those things to a group of people, you do feel a sense of ownership, if you will, and you have a paternalistic attitude towards that group of people, right? Nevertheless, the same dudes who would be the ones trying to dictate all of these things to black women don't seem to be so quick to want to protect them, even though they do feel a sense of ownership by the way that they're acting in regards to in regards to trying to dictate what black women can and cannot do. You know, when you start dictating what people can and cannot do, that does sort of demonstrate and illustrate somebody feeling as if they have ownership or control over somebody. Uh, and there are like a lot of different factors that come into play when it comes to protection and triggering people to protect other people. And I think that ownership is a factor, as I mentioned previously, but I don't think that it's the only factor or the ultimate factor. I think there's other factors that go into this. As I mentioned, for example, ownership, that is a factor, I think, or can be a factor. Another factor, you know, familial ties, familial bonds, right? Like, you may feel a sense of, you may feel like you need to protect somebody who is like, perhaps your sibling or your parent, right? And you're like, well, you're doing that because that's your sibling and that's your parent. That's ownership. And I don't think that's necessarily ownership. I do think that is connection, though. In this case, I do think this is more so about connection, right? Because, yes, possessive pronouns, I think that's the correct word, possessives, like my, yours, ours, his, hers, etc., they do demonstrate ownership, but they also are used to demonstrate connection as well, right? As well, you may feel triggered to protect people who are in the same racial group as you, who are in the same gender group as you, right? Who are in the same religious group as you, who maybe even just who are human beings. Heck, sometimes you feel a sense to protect even like animals, just because it's just a living being, And I think ultimately what this all boils down to is having a connection to something or someone, more so someone in this case, and as well, feeling as if someone or something is of value to protect. That's a part of it too. Because you can own something, but you don't necessarily feel that it may be of value and be worth protecting. Like you can have a pair of, very worn out, run down, raggedy ass shoes, and those are your shoes. You do own them. You paid for them, right? But you may not feel a sense to protect them because you don't really see them as valuable. You're like, whatever, I was going to throw them away anyway, right? So if they got damaged or misplaced or lost or whatever, you probably wouldn't really care because you didn't really view them as being of value to you, right? Even though you own them, right? But let's say you have a brand new pair of shoes that you just purchased, bought, and paid a couple of bucks for, right? And all of a sudden, you can't find them. You're like, where are the shoes at? Where are my shoes at? I just purchased these. I just placed them here. Now I can't find them. Where are my shoes at, right? And yeah, you own these shoes, but you also view them as of having some value, right? So you want to get your shoes back very bad because you think, like, you done spent like say $200 on these shoes, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I ain't get my $200 worth of these damn shoes yet. So I got to get these shoes back. You know, I got to find these shoes. And I think, you know, those examples may be a little basic maybe, and maybe even a little myopic. But ultimately, I think it illustrates the point, right, that I'm trying to make with this video and just in general in this conversation, which is, yes, ownership is a factor, but it's not the only factor, and in many cases, it's not the deciding factor. I think there's more to it than that. And I think that that argument is somewhat used. Well, I haven't really heard this argument used that much. This is the first time I really heard this argument used. But I think it may be used by whoever, you know, presented it as a way for black men to sidestep their responsibility as black men in the black community, and, you know, patriarchs, and at least wanting to be seen as leaders and patriarchs and all that stuff, right? And, you know, this would be a part of being a leader and a patriarch, you know, providing protection, especially for, you know, women and as well children, right? So, again, those are just some things to think about. So another question that needs to be brought up is, you know, and I think this is by black women, and especially is, you know, why don't black men probably seem to have such, you know, a strong sense or desire to protect and defend black women, like seemingly black women have to defend and protect black men, right? And, you know, that is something that you do see played out. It's like, you know, black women, you know, going hard in the paint to defend black men, and it's seeming like the favor isn't being reciprocated as strongly. And why is that? And I think this goes into like a deeper thing when it comes to black women being black male identified, and blackness being viewed as something that's primarily black men. Black women aren't viewed as being black people. They're viewed as being black women, while black men are viewed as both black men and black people. So when black men are under attack, it seems like, oh, black people are under attack. But when black women are under attack, it's just, oh, it's just black women. It doesn't really apply to black people, right? I think that's partly what's at play here, where it's just like, well, black men represent black people. Black women do not represent black people. Black women are not black people. Black women are black women. Black men are black people. And if you didn't understand that at this point, pause the video, go back a couple of minutes, replay it. If it doesn't work, rinse and repeat. All right. So that being said, I think that is a factor. As well, I think that many black women are black male identified. And I think them being black male identified may be partly because they view black men as being black people, and they want to be black people. And as well as other factors too about how the community treats black women and puts certain expectations on black women that seemingly should be put on black men versus black women, right? And you know how the community kind of plays with black women. Like one minute they want them to play the masculine role, one minute they want them to play the feminine role, and it's being like an gender identity issue or situation that's in flux, where it's like, okay, female gender role, male gender role, female gender roles, male gender roles, and folks just don't know which role they want black women to play. They want them to do both, and you can't do both. At least do both without some sort of issue arising at one point or another, right? Right. But when it comes to protection in black women and black men and the role that they play and perhaps don't play at times, I think partially, I think that this doesn't happen as much because maybe black men don't feel that they can truly protect black women, right? Give them the protection that, say, white men can give white women, especially when it comes to black men, right? And perhaps another part of this is maybe they don't feel triggered to protect black women because maybe they view black women as being black men in some sense. So it's like, when it comes to men and protection amongst themselves, I would say that men are less likely to jump in a situation that another man is in, with another man, unless he really knew the man really well. Like maybe it was like a familial connection or tie, or perhaps like a really good friend, right? But on the other hand, like if a woman was in a situation, particularly, but especially with a man, and it was seemingly had the potential to become violent, then I think men in general would feel a sense to jump in and protect the woman, right? And I think that's another thing that plays out too when it comes to why people may want to protect other people. They may feel like they need to protect them because they may feel like they may not be strong enough to protect themselves in this particular situation. They may not be able to, right? A child versus an adult, or like, or rather, an adult versus a child, or a man versus a woman, right? In situations like that, seemingly there's sort of an uneven playing field, if you will, right? And that's what I think in society we generally, women are viewed as needing and being worthy of protection, or at least needing protection in some sense, right? As well as kids. But when it comes to the black community, things are a little, flip-flopped and right side up, right? So seemingly it's more like, black men seem to be the black women and children of the black community, right? Heck, you can even think about that situation that happened between Chris Brown and Rihanna, right? When that situation played out, it seemed like there was, at least in the black community, it seemed like there was more so a sense of protection when it came to Chris Brown versus when it came to Rihanna, right? It's like, if you go back, it's in the black community, the way that played out, the way I saw it played out, it seemed like folks were more concerned about Chris Brown's safety and protection versus Rihanna's safety and protection, right? Again, it's just something to think about, you know. But, to summarize this and to break it down and cut to the chase, I personally think that black men maybe, aren't so quick to jump to, the fence and to protect when it comes to black women. I think partially because the black male collective cannot, provide protection as a white man can for white women. That's why I don't think there is a trigger to do so at times, as well, black men may not feel a connection with black women, right? That's a little disturbing if that is the case, especially when black women are feeling the connection with black men. Perhaps it's because maybe black men may view black women as being on par with them. May not want to admit something like that, but perhaps in some cases, in some situations, perhaps because of the way that, white supremacy and slavery and, all our historical baggage has played out, I don't think that's extremely far-fetched. Like, the slavery experience was dehumanizing for black people. It was emasculating for black men and defeminizing for black women. So, you know, taking away someone's femininity, taking away someone's masculinity, you know, perhaps. All right. But yeah, so when it comes to why black men may not be so triggered to protect black women, I think those are the factors. When it comes to protection in general, when it comes to black men and black women, I do think ultimately, as well as just in general, I think it ultimately just boils down to, you know, having a connection, right? The connection for protection, right? Black men just, I don't know. I don't want to say that, you know. I really don't want to put nothing like they're out, like, you know, out into the atmosphere like that and on the record like that, because it is sort of like, if that is the truth, that's, you know, a very sad, ugly, disgusting truth, right? But nevertheless, I do have an obligation to keep it all the way 100, right? Do I have an obligation to do that? I don't know. But nevertheless, that's what I should be doing when I'm here, right? Especially when I'm here, right? You know, but as well, there's so many, this is such a nuanced topic and there's so many different layers to this though, you know, and I know this video won't do as much justice as can be done for this topic, but I do think, you know, it's a start, all right? It's a start. Another thing that comes up when it comes to black women defending and protecting black men, I think sometimes that's a way of black women to obtain some sort of validation, right? That they may not get from their beauty like other groups of women do. So I think that's why you may see a lot of black women going the, you know, pro-black social justice route instead, you know, of not going that route, right? Or, you know, going a different route, right? You know, the beauty and hypergamy route, perhaps, you know. Like, that's another topic in itself too, right? And it's, again, it's just something to think about. It's something to really just stop for a moment and just think about that, all this that goes into it, right? But, you know, another example I can give that's perhaps a bit more relatable, I guess. Well, not relatable, but another example I can give is, say you have a parent, and okay, it's a situation where you and your parent, while this person is your parent, you guys have never met and never had any sort of interaction with each other at all throughout your whole life. Now, all of a sudden, you hear that your parent is, you know, terminally ill, you know, or perhaps just has some sort of a medical problem. You know, and a person may not, in a situation like that, may not feel so quick to want to jump to their parents' defense and help them because they don't really have much of a connection with their parent, if any connection, right? On the flip side, say if you have a parent and you guys have a wonderful, awesome relationship, and, you know, it's very much a relationship that, you know, is a lot of people would love to have with their parent, right? And parents would love to have with their kids, what have you, right? And your parent becomes, you know, ill, you know, and needs some assistance. I'm pretty sure that the child in that situation would, you know, jump to their parents' defense and want to help them because they have such a strong connection with their parent, right? Again, there's something to think about there. Just, you know, just another example, right? You know, just because this person is your parent and you guys do have a familial connection, right? There is some, I guess you may want to say that's some ownership, perhaps. But ultimately it all, like I said, it boils down to the connection. If you gotta have that connection for protection. You know? It boils down to having a connection ultimately, right? Again, ownership, however we want to see this, right? I do think that that's a factor, but it's not the deciding factor. And I feel like, I don't know who, I feel like the black man who presented this argument to the black female YouTuber, you know, the black woman YouTuber, you guys don't like when I say females, so I'm going to try not to say females as much unless, you know, I'm, you know, dealing with some females. And the situation there, I don't know, I just feel like that was somewhat of a cop-out, right? Like, oh, let's just present that because they don't want to really deal with what's really at play in the situation here. And, you know, I think the black woman YouTuber somewhat fell for it, you know, perhaps, you know, or perhaps she was just presenting his argument to her black women and girls subscribers and seeing what they think. But I will say she seemed to be, from what I remember, it seemed like she was leaning more towards his argument, you know, and seemingly leaning more towards his side, because I don't really remember her offering much rebuttal to the argument. I think she was more so in agreement with the argument, even though it was more like a begrudging agreement in the argument. But, you know, nevertheless, whatever. I'm just presenting things that should be taken into account and should be factored in and should be thought about, and, you know, just presenting another aspect to this argument, right? So that's all I gotta say. I'm going on for long enough, so tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.